Hey, welcome back, everyone. So, big episode today. Again, I recently had a conversation with Kash Patel. He was the chief of staff to the acting Secretary of Defense under Trump. We also talked to an individual named Jeff Zink. Jeff Zink is a political candidate in Arizona, and he's alleging that his son is being used to blackmail him over January 6th, and that he's being told that if he drops out of the race, his son will be set free. Now, that's his claim. I want to show you all the interview I did with him because I think it's a pretty serious claim and one that I think he does have some evidence for. So I will be showing those interviews today. I also want to go over a few other stories. Again, today's a special episode, today, tomorrow, special episodes focused more on January 6th, although today I'm going to mix it. I'm going to have some other stories as well because I want to catch up on the news with you all a bit. But folks, those of you on YouTube, Rumble, we will be opening up the subs today on Epic TV. So if you don't have a subscription, just come join us. No paywall, no nothing. But they just don't let us talk about January 6th on YouTube. They will delete our videos. They've done it many times in the past. And they'll sometimes even give us strikes. And so we cannot show you this stuff on YouTube. So again, after a bit, we'll jump over exclusively. We'll probably do a shorter thing on YouTube just because there's a lot we can't talk about there. So first, though, I want to talk about monkeypox, though, because you may have seen some of the stories about this. Real quick, too, though, folks, if you have not seen the documentary on January 6th, please watch it. I'm showing you all a lot of evidence related to, January 6th and some of the stuff I've been coming across. This documentary is the consolidation of all the key information. That's why we called it The Real Story of January 6th. We tried to do something that's more complete. We touch on these suspicious actors, and there's a lot of that. We talk about the unfortunate, unjustified use of force of many of the police officers that day. Including with body cam footage that you actually normally cannot get. We have, of course, a lot of different evidence on the deaths that day, showing that very likely all four of them may have been murders, frankly. And I think we show some pretty compelling evidence the public needs to see to fully understand January 6th. So if you've not seen the documentary, please watch it. It's on Epic TV. And if you've seen it already, please share it. Tell your friends, tell your family members, because really there's no way we can get it out on a lot of platforms. A lot of people don't want to talk about January 6th. I'm kind of shocked by it. You'd be surprised trying to kind of promote this documentary, how difficult it has been getting some people to even want to talk about it. A lot of people will not touch any January 6th information that deviates from the narrative. Not because typically they don't believe it, but because they don't want the backlash. So please share it, get the word out. And again, it's on Epic TV. All right, that said, let's jump into the first story. I want to talk about monkeypox because monkeypox has now been declared. There's a state of emergency declared around monkeypox. I'm going to show you a few things on this. First of all of California now, but it started with San Francisco. San Francisco declared a state of emergency over monkeypox, now declared over all of California. But let me show you what they're saying there. Epic Times has a story. They say San Francisco is declaring a local public health emergency for monkeypox. London Breed, the mayor of the city, announced this. He said this declaration will go into effect starting August 1st and will allow us to prepare and dedicate resources to prevent the spread. The declaration is a legal document that allows authorities to mobilize city resources, streamline staffing, and coordinate agencies across the city, as well as speed up the emergency planning and allow for future reimbursement by the state and federal governments, said in a statement. Now, in other words, they're giving themselves more powers over the spread of a virus that is mostly not deadly. I think there have been 2 deaths now outside of Africa. Mostly, one is in Brazil. I can't remember where the other one was. Typically not deadly. But it is a very painful, very uncomfortable illness, according to people who've had it. Now, it's also being spread almost exclusively, like 98%, among homosexual men. And people are blaming this, of course, on some of the promiscuous behaviors, such as the groups they have. I won't get into the details. But there are some alerts in San Francisco around this because they have a big meetup, 5,000-ish people for some fetish event. And some of the alerts for people there is don't do it. It's if you have these blisters, cover your blisters before you go. And people are saying, well, didn't they lock down the whole country and told all of us we can't go out? Why are they not making stronger protocols for a disease that's being spread almost exclusively among homosexual men through sexual acts? That's one of the big arguments for this, but nobody wants to touch that, frankly. And so instead, they're declaring a state of emergency throughout all of California and New York, and Biden's also declaring some new things on this as well. Now, in San Francisco, it says the city has had at least 281 cases out of about 800 in California and about 4,907 across the United States as of late July 28th, including probable cases, according to data from San Francisco's Health Department and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Cases of monkeypox have increased in California since late June, which was the end of Pride Month. Of course, homosexual celebration month, right? San Francisco, according to the public health officer, Dr. Susan Phillips, San Francisco is an epicenter for this country. 30% of all cases in California are in San Francisco. Now, San Francisco shut down its primary monkeypox vaccination clinic earlier this week after it ran out of doses, saying it only received 7,800 doses of a requested 35,000. Now, in other words, they're not being sent the number of vaccines that they're even requesting. More people are getting vaccinated than they have vaccines for, mainly because it appears the FDA, there's different accusations on who's slowing up the process, but because basically not enough are getting out. Not enough of these vaccines are getting out. Meanwhile, the FDA, different government branches in charge of dealing with the vaccines, they're telling people dealing with the monkeypox vaccine that if you get the vaccine, you're basically part of a clinical trial. Funny because this was actually an approved vaccine previously, but the way they're talking about it now is as if, well, that it's not fully approved, essentially. New York is also doing the same thing now. Gothamist reports this is monkeypox is a state of emergency, according to the New York governor. It says New York Governor Kathy Hochul declared the state's monkeypox outbreak a state disaster emergency on Friday. And it says the executive order enables many types of healthcare workers, from EMTs to midwives, to administer vaccines as they come in. It also requires that healthcare providers send vaccine data back to the state so that the health officials can track the rollout. And this is a quote. It said, this is according to Hochul, more than 1 in 4 monkeypox cases in this country are in New York State. We need to utilize every tool in our arsenal as we respond. And also, New York is leading the nation in monkeypox cases. According to data from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the state has logged 1,345 cases of the illness. And that's almost certainly an undercount, they claim. The city's health department says that many cases have gone undiagnosed. Now, what they're doing right now is they're declaring a state of emergency over a virus that is actually not that common, first of all, and is being spread almost entirely among one group of people, that is homosexual men. Again, around 98% homosexual men. And they're giving themselves different abilities to mobilize the troops, so to speak, around this, giving themselves additional powers while refusing to address the actual cause of the disease, which is, of course, promiscuous behavior, specifically on this case around homosexual men, unfortunately. But they don't want to say that. They don't want to talk about that, meaning they're not actually taking the steps to actually resolve the problem. Instead of taking the steps to resolve the problem, they're granting themselves new emergency powers, and they're also basically punishing the entire states and possibly soon the entire country in ways that will give them additional powers, very likely just before the midterm elections, as far as I see it. Now, briefly, folks, we do have a sponsor today. Today's episode is brought to you by Secure. Over 155 million Americans are affected by data leaks in 2020. The average American had their personal data stolen about 4 times over the year. People get anxious because they can't protect their online data and activity, but now there's an email and messenger app called Secure. That's SEKUR. That can give privacy and security for sending emails and messages. Secure's server and data center are hosted in Switzerland, which has the strictest data privacy laws in the world. Secure does not rely on big tech companies like Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, which also means it's not subject to the Intrusive Cloud Act. Secure does not ask for your phone number, it does not mine your data, or upload your contacts. It functions by adding people you know, then adding their secure numbers, and you can still chat with non-secure users by sending them an invite. Secure protects you from hackers getting onto your phone. You also have privacy while you're on the app. Now, it's only $5 for the messenger, $7 for the email, or $10 for the email and messenger package. You can visit secure.com today for a free 7-day trial, or you can use the promo code Joshua to get 25% off. And again, big thanks out to Secure for sponsoring today's episode. Now, briefly, one more thing on the pandemics, not necessarily monkeypox, but on something much more serious, I'd say. And we'll jump over into the January 6th content. But remember how New York was basically, they were trying to give themselves the powers in New York to throw people in essentially COVID concentration camps. They called them quarantined camps. They were actually doing this. A New York judge has thrown out that law. And this is important because this makes it so they cannot throw healthy people in quarantine camps. And especially as they're declaring, they're declaring public health emergencies and states of emergency and other things like this, really on things that are normal level infections, things that are not showing signs of becoming pandemics, things that show signs of, new and emerging diseases, of course, but not on like pandemic levels. And through doing that, they're giving themselves crazy additional powers. One of the powers they tried giving themselves in New York, the local officials here, they tried giving themselves the power to throw healthy people in quarantine camps forcefully, very similar to what they were doing in parts of Australia. But that's now been thrown out. This is Epoch Times reporting. It says New York judge throws out state's quarantine camp law, declaring it unenforceable. It says a New York judge overturned a law that allowed the state government to place even healthy citizens in quarantine camps for an indefinite time without review. Meaning they actually did pass this in New York. This was a power they had already given themselves in New York. And it would let them throw you in a quarantine camp, a concentration camp, for as long as they wanted, indefinite, without any kind of review. Meaning they could imprison you, essentially, on anything without review, right? Imprison you for anything for as long as they wanted, under the guise of, again, an emergency vaccine or a more emergency virus or something like that, even if you're healthy. Meaning they could have gone after anybody with this. It got thrown out, luckily. It says until July 8th, the New York City Health Department had immense power to enforce quarantine measures on citizens. It received the power from the state's Rule 2.13. Legislators never voted to allow the New York Commissioner of Health to put any individual into quarantine for any length of time. But Governor Hochul and the Department of Health ordered the rules protocols during the COVID-19 pandemic. So in other words, the governor, Kathy Hochul, alongside the New York Department of Health, worked together to do this, bypassing the state legislature, and gave themselves the ability to imprison anybody for as long as they wanted, whether or not the person was sick or not, without any review. They did, in fact, do this. Then the state renewed Rule 2.13 every 90 days. The commissioner wanted to make the rule permanent, respondents told the court. The court overturned that, however, stating that the executive branch, the governor in this case, had wrongly used legislative authority. And there's a quote, it said, involuntary detention is a severe deprivation of individual liberty, far more egregious than any health safety measure, such as requiring mask wearing at certain venues, the court opinion read. And it continues stating, involuntary quarantine may have far-reaching consequences such as loss of income or employment and isolation from family. The court barred state enforcement of Rule 2.13 because the executive branch lacked the authority to introduce it. But the court decision also condemned the rule for its failure to consider individual freedom or due process. It's a quote here from the court document. It says the commissioner has unfettered discretion to issue a quarantine or isolation for anyone, even if there is no evidence that person is infected or a carrier of the disease. Further, the commissioner sets the term, duration, and location of the detention, not an independent magistrate. New York Governor Kathy Hochul gave herself that power, working together with the Department of Health. That was in place. They wanted to give themselves the power, bypassing again the state legislature, to throw anybody they wanted in any kind of quarantine facility in any location without any kind of review. Now, just emphasizing the way that politics in this country have gone, that they would grant themselves powers like this, even bypassing the normal procedures of government, going through the state legislature. Even aside from that, though, the fact that they would give themselves this type of authority and means really that they intended to use it, or at least thought they might intend to use it, if something happens in the future. And the real scary thing about this, and I know I've talked about this before, this is what the Nazis did. Remember, the genocide against the Jews was justified under the idea of a public health emergency. We've had an interview on this a while back. They declared that there was a public health emergency on the body politic, that the body of the country was sick, and they deemed another group of people in the society the cause of that sickness on the body politic, on the body of the country. That's what they did. And this emphasizes the point, too, that you can use laws like this, expand the language of the laws, or even alter the language of the laws to do things that they were never intended to do. You could easily declare, for example, that global warming is a public health emergency. And what are the causes of global warming? Well, it's the system of politics based on the history of white nationalism. They could say stuff like this. In fact, there are people saying stuff like this. And they could declare that the only solution to this is the elimination of the cause of this, which happens to be, white people or something like that. They could do something like that. And there are people talking about doing stuff like that. And I'm not saying they were actually going to do that. But what I'm saying is this has been done in history, where a group of people becomes targeted, or an ideology becomes targeted under the banner of, protecting public health. And if they create facilities and laws that give them the ability to imprison people indefinitely under the banner of public health, well, that's what happens. Now, on this note, I want to jump over to Epic TV, and I want to show you some of the interviews we had with Kash Patel and with this local official in Arizona. Because what we're seeing right now is a narrative, I think a candidate, What we're seeing right now is, in fact, things that involve really the abuse of the legal systems. The abuse, for example, of creating investigation commissions, really bypassing things written in the Constitution on having two sides and the ability to investigate, bypassing a lot of the normal protections we have as citizens to make sure that we're not being investigated for political reasons. Other protections we have, ensuring that we're not being imprisoned on things there's no evidence for. Many of these laws are being violated, unfortunately, under the January 6th Commission and under the laws that are being enforced by the judges in Washington around January 6th. We have some important interviews on this. I want to get into this. First, though, folks, let me show you a quick trailer. Actually, we had another show. You might know Roman Balmakabi does our show Facts Matter. He just had on General Flynn. And General Flynn's talking about his $50 million lawsuit against the FBI and the Department of Justice. Let me show you this real quick.
It's not this piece of intel or that little thing about the military and all these crazy, truly conspiracy theories that are out there. It's really the strategic direction of the country is heading towards an ideology that is communist. This sense of antagonism between our own federal government and us, the American people. Why do we feel this constant sense of angst? And we do because our federal government is usurping the United States Constitution. They have usurped their ethics, their morals, and their law. And they took advantage of it because they were in positions of power and authority, and they thought that they were going to get away with it. We are at risk to lose it here in the United States of America. If we lose it here in this country, then the rest of the freedom-loving world is done.
All right, folks. If you're on YouTube, again, Special episodes today and tomorrow still. There's no subscription wall, no paywall, no nothing on Epic TV. But we cannot show you a lot of our January 6th content on YouTube. So come join us now. It's totally open, no paywall, no nothing. Come join us. There's a great discussion. There's a great community there. Jump over, and we're going to go into some of the J6 content. All right, folks. Those of you curious, by the way, I have a nice Taiwanese oolong tea today, along with my new